Think about the smell of your childhood home right now. Just for a second. Don't analyze it. Just let it come. Something happened, didn't it? Something moved in your chest before your brain had a single word ready. Maybe warmth, maybe weight, maybe something you can't name but your body already recognizes. That reaction happened before you could decide anything about it. Before logic. Before memory. Before choice. That's not nostalgia, that's neuroscience. And what it tells us about who you are today is far stranger and more important than most people will ever stop long enough to understand. Here's what nobody told you growing up. Your childhood home wasn't just where you slept and ate and played and grew. It was a construction site. And your brain was the thing being built. Every sound that repeated inside those walls got wired into you. Every argument that bled through the ceiling. Every creak of a door that meant someone was coming. Every night that was quiet and safe, or wasn't. Your developing brain was absorbing all of it, not as stories, not as memories, not as lessons, as architecture, as the literal structure of how you perceive the world, how you respond to threat, how you interpret love, and what your nervous system decides is normal. That architecture is still running right now, inside you, today. You carry it into every room you walk into, every relationship you sit across from, every moment of conflict or comfort or unexplained dread. The house is gone. The blueprint is still active. And most people never once stop to look at it. So, what exactly happened inside those walls? How deep does it go? And why, despite everything you've learned, everything you've worked on, everything you've survived and overcome, can some of it never be fully undone? Let's start at the beginning. Let's start with the brain your childhood home actually met. When you were born, your brain contained roughly 100 billion neurons, but almost none of them were meaningfully connected yet. The brain you arrived in the world with was less like a finished mind and more like a library with empty shelves, enormous potential, very little content. And the first thing that began filling those shelves wasn't school. It wasn't friends. It wasn't your own decisions. It was your environment. Specifically, the repeated sensory environment of the home you were placed in before you had any say in the matter. Neuroscientist Michael Merzenich spent decades studying neuroplasticity, the brain's capacity to physically reshape itself in response to experience. What his research revealed changed how we understand early development completely. The brain doesn't passively absorb the world. It reorganizes around whatever inputs it receives most consistently. Patterns that repeat become permanent neural pathways. Experiences that don't repeat get pruned away during a process the brain carries out between early childhood and late adolescence. Use it or lose it at the level of neurons. Your childhood home was the single most repeated sensory input your developing brain ever received. Let that sink in for a moment. Not school, not relationships, not your own choices later in life. The home you grew up in, the specific quality of sounds it held, the emotional temperature of its rooms, the way safety felt or didn't feel inside it. All of that repetition was shaping which neural pathways strengthened and which ones faded. Your brain was learning from it, calibrating to it, building its model of reality around it. This is what researchers call environmental imprinting, and it goes far deeper than most people are ever taught. In the 1990s, neuroscientist Bruce Perry began documenting what happens to the brains of children raised in high-stress home environments. His findings weren't what most people expected. He didn't find vague emotional damage. He found measurable physical differences in how those brains developed. The stress response systems, particularly the amygdala and the circuit that governs cortisol and the fight-or-flight response, were literally calibrated differently in children who grew up in unpredictable or threatening homes. Their systems detected danger faster. They produced stronger stress responses. They returned to calm more slowly afterward. And here's the part that matters most. None of that was dysfunction. All of it was adaptation. Those brains were doing exactly what a brain is supposed to do, learning from its environment and optimizing for survival within it. If your home said danger is unpredictable, your brain learned to stay on guard. If your home said love comes and goes without explanation, your brain built emotional circuitry designed to constantly monitor for withdrawal. If your home was calm, consistent, and safe, your brain learned that rest is possible, that relationships can be trusted, that the world is basically navigable. The problem isn't the adaptation. The problem is that the adaptation doesn't know it can stop. Think about your reactions right now. Not the ones you plan. The ones that happen before you plan. When someone raises their voice, even slightly. When a relationship goes unexpectedly quiet. When you walk into a house that feels a certain way. And something in you changes before you've consciously identified why. When you feel a restlessness in spaces that are too small, or an inexplicable unease in rooms with no natural light, or a specific tightness in your chest during a certain kind of silence. You probably think those are just about the present moment. They're not. They're the original calibration doing its job. The job it learned to do in a house you no longer live in. Psychologist John Bowlby dedicated his life to understanding attachment, the bond between children and caregivers, and what he found went far beyond parent-child relationships. Attachment patterns, he showed, become the operating template the brain uses to interpret every significant relationship in adult life. If your home was a place where closeness felt stable and reliable, your brain built an internal model that says, closeness is safe. Reach for it. If your home was a place where love felt conditional or withdrawn or explosive, your brain built a different model entirely. One that says, closeness is a risk that needs to be managed very carefully. And here is the part Bowlby's work makes impossible to ignore. Those models don't update automatically with time. They update slowly, through experience, when new experiences are repeated often enough to build new pathways. But the original template doesn't disappear. It sits underneath everything you've learned since. It waits. And under enough stress, enough exhaustion, enough uncertainty, it pulls you back into its logic without asking permission. This is why you can know intellectually that you're safe and still feel afraid. You can know a relationship is good and still be waiting for it to break. You can recognize a pattern you swore you would never repeat and find yourself in it anyway. The house isn't haunting you. The house became you. It became you while you were too young to have any say in the matter, and it goes beyond the emotional atmosphere. The physical environment itself left marks that most psychology still doesn't fully account for. Researcher Roger Ulrich at Texas A&M University spent years studying the measurable effects of physical environments on the human nervous system. Built spaces, the height of ceilings, the level of ambient noise, the amount of natural light, the degree of crowding, the presence of nature, produce consistent, measurable changes in blood pressure, cortisol levels, and nervous system state. The body reads the room, always, without being asked, without your permission. For an adult, this effect is real and significant. For a developing child whose nervous system is still forming, it's amplified beyond what most people would believe. Whether you had a room of your own, with a door you could close and a space that was only yours, or whether you shared everything with no private refuge, whether your home was filled with natural light or chronically dim, whether the sounds around you were predictable or chaotic, whether the air inside held peace or tension, whether your home felt large enough to breathe in or small enough to feel trapped, all of that was feeding directly into the calibration of your nervous system at the exact window of time when that calibration was being permanently set. You didn't choose any of it, and it shaped you more than almost anything that came after. There's another layer to this that science has only recently begun to fully understand, and it goes even deeper than the neural pathways laid down by experience. Research into epigenetics, the study of how experiences can switch genes on and off without changing the DNA itself, has shown that extreme stress in early environments can alter the expression of genes related to cortisol sensitivity, immune function, and even the way the brain processes emotional memory. Researcher Michael Meany at McGill University demonstrated this in landmark studies showing that the quality of early caregiving literally changes the genetic expression of stress response systems, not the genes themselves, the switches that control them. What this means is that your childhood home didn't just shape your psychology. It may have shaped your biology at a level that sits below memory, below narrative, below anything you can talk yourself out of. You are carrying more of that first house than you probably ever knew. Here is the question that sits at the center of all of this. Can any of it be changed? The honest answer is yes, and also not entirely. Neuroscientists have identified what they call critical periods, developmental windows during which the brain is exceptionally sensitive to certain kinds of input. During those windows, experience doesn't just influence the brain, it sets it. The analogy researchers use is wet concrete, malleable under pressure, but hardening over time. After the window closes, you can still work the surface, you can carve into it, you can change what sits on top of it, but you cannot pour it fresh. The stress response baseline set by your childhood home is one of those deep-set things. It can be regulated with practice, with therapy, with consistent new experience. It can shift significantly over time. But the original calibration, the threshold at which your alarm system fires, the speed at which your body floods with stress, the default setting of your nervous system, was established early, and it leaves an imprint that does not fully vanish with time alone. The same is true of attachment. Research on what's called earned security shows that adults absolutely can develop safe, stable ways of relating even when their early experience taught them something very different. But the original template doesn't disappear. It quiets under calm conditions. It resurfaces under pressure. The old map still exists. It's just no longer the only map available to you. This is not a verdict. It's important information, and the difference between those two things is everything. Because the moment you stop trying to erase your history and start trying to understand it, something changes. When you feel the old alarm sound, the one that doesn't belong to the present moment, and you can recognize it for what it is, it loses some of its automatic power. Not all of it, but some. And sometimes some is everything. There's one more thing you should know, something that catches most people completely off guard when they first encounter it. The vast majority of adults unconsciously recreate the emotional atmosphere of their childhood home. Not the design, not the furniture, the feeling. Research on adult relationships and living patterns consistently shows this. People are drawn, again and again, to emotional climates that match the one they were calibrated to in early life. Not because they want to repeat the past, not because they're broken, because the nervous system experiences familiarity as safety, even when what was familiar was painful. The brain has a map for that emotional territory. It knows the terrain. Stepping into something genuinely different, something quieter, safer, more loving, more stable than what you grew up with, can feel deeply uncomfortable. Not because it's wrong, because it's unknown. And the brain, at its most primal, orients toward the familiar before it can consider whether the familiar is good. This is why people end up in the same argument with different faces, why they leave relationships that feel too calm, why they build homes that hold, unconsciously, invisibly, the exact emotional frequency of the home they were raised in. The past isn't just past, it's the default setting, and most people live their entire lives inside it without knowing the setting was ever there. So what do you do with all of this? The first thing, the only place any of this can start, is to see it. Actually see it. Most people go their entire lives running childhood code in adult situations and never once trace the reaction back to the source. The first time you can look at something triggered in you, the tightness, the withdrawal, the need, the fear, and recognize it as an echo rather than a current reality. Something shifts. You're no longer just inside the program. You can see the program. The second thing is to stop demanding that you simply override it through willpower. You cannot unhear what your childhood home taught you. You cannot pour the concrete fresh. Willpower alone cannot rewire a nervous system that was calibrated before you had language. Demanding that you just decide to be different, that you choose different reactions, that you simply get over it, that's like asking software to run on hardware it was never written for. What you can do is update the system, slowly, through experience, through repetition, new patterns of safety, practiced consistently, build new neural pathways. Relationships where closeness doesn't come with danger, retrain the attachment system, one interaction at a time. Somatic therapies that work directly with the nervous system, rather than just the story you tell about it in a chair, can shift baseline states over time in ways that talk alone cannot fully reach. The original isn't erased, it's updated, layered over, gradually outweighed by new experience that says, this time, it's different. Your childhood home wrote the first draft of you. You didn't ask for that draft. You didn't choose the words. You didn't design the walls or select the light or decide what the silence would feel like at night or what a raised voice would mean or how safe it felt to close your eyes. But here is the truth that carries the most weight. First, drafts are not final drafts. The brain that was shaped by your earliest environment is the same brain that has been reshaping itself around every experience that came after. The same quality that made it so vulnerable in childhood, that extraordinary sensitivity to repeated experience, is the same quality that makes change possible now. It never stops building. It never stops learning. The architecture updates itself until the last day it runs. You are not the house you grew up in. You carry its blueprint, but you have been walking out of that door and building something new with every single year you have been alive, whether you realized you were building or not. Tonight, when you walk into a room and feel something shift, some pull of the past, some echo of a house you left long ago, you'll know what it is now. Not a flaw. Not evidence that something is permanently wrong with you. The original code, still running, still trying to protect you in a world it learned before you knew the world at all. You are not what was built around you in the beginning. You are everything you have chosen to build since that first door opened and you stepped through it into the rest of your life. If this video reached something in you that you've never quite had words for before, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to this channel. Every week, we go exactly this deep into the science of what made you who you are. Hit like if this changed how you see yourself. And leave a comment below. More people than you know are carrying the same blueprint, and sometimes knowing that is the first new piece of architecture